there.
TCAN, okay. So with this program, how long has it been going on? How many years?
Through the mayor to Councillor Height, it's been in place for years. I'd have to get the exact length of time from our program manager. I don't have it handy, and as you know, I wasn't here at that time. So, but we can definitely provide you with that.
Okay. I'll come back to this. Thank you.
Anything further on this? Councillor Sonnenberg?
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to ask a general question, get away from number crunching for 1 minute. My question pertains to something that was said almost an hour ago now, and is when we were going through the details, Mr. Ford says something like, we got to be careful about privacy. I thought everything around here was public information. The public knows what I make and what my expenses are. They know what Mr. Ford makes and they know what the mayor makes. They don't? Mr. Ford is shaking his head.
Just want to respond?
The public can find out what my salary range is, but if they phone up and say, I'd like to know how much money you're paying the treasurer, we can't tell them that. We can say that the salary range for the treasurer is in pay group 7 or whatever number it is, and here it is from here to here, period.
Go ahead, Keith.
But
As soon as you start to identify an individual, that becomes confidential information.
Okay. So, I'm sorry, the mayor and councillor is public information, but staff is not.
through you, Mr. Mayor, I think we should clarify, though, that the Public Sector Salary Disclosure Act does require the municipality to annually publish the salaries of all employees who make more than $100,000 a year. So that is one that does go into that level of detail.
Okay.
The sunshine.
Yep.
I'm sorry, that's the only place where it becomes public, but if we take a look at a clerk in the department and say, okay, you got 3 accounting clerks, what's Mary's salary? The answer is I can't tell you. I can tell you what an accounting clerk makes, but I can't tell you what Mary makes.
Okay.
For all of the people that are on the sunshine list, the provincial government years ago decided they needed to be centered out, so they are actually identified. So when we talk about that, that's what we're really speaking of. And if somebody is being reimbursed for a course that they've taken, or they're going to a training session, this is John Ford's going to this training session, that's personal information. We can say that here's how much training we have for the department, but when you want to say how much does that employee training does that employee get, we can't tell you that in public.
Question, Marlene, one I have on this is back again to, on this detail, these meeting expenses. Do other, and this isn't a question for you, but I'm asking this because I'm wondering what other employees have meeting expenses of this amount. So what basically is last year it's looked at about $12,000 roughly, 11.5 on a budget of 3, and now they're looking at 7. Like, what are these meeting expenses? Have you talked something about getting reimbursed? Like, I'm just not fully understanding what a meeting expense is. I get mileage to go to a meeting?
No, sometimes.
Marlene, do you know what specifically they are?
Meeting expenses vary across all of the programs, and I would suggest across all the divisions and the department. The TCAN is a provincial committee that gets together and works on the tobacco and the smoke-free programs collectively to move the agenda forward. So, and they pool their resources, they leverage each other's resources, and it's my understanding that this is a mandatory meeting expense as part of the Smoke-Free Ontario. And we are reimbursed by participating in this committee.
Well, Again, and I want to make it clear that I'm not talking about an individual or individuals. I'm talking in general terms. Here we have a situation where, based on the 2016 actuals, we're spending $1,000 a month on meeting expenses. $1,000 a month. I look over at the budget on page 13 in relation to this, and I'm seeing that this comes out of the material, I believe, and supplies. Yes. I see we're asking this year for an additional $18,000 over what was spent last year. I go down to the offsetting revenue at the bottom, and I don't see anything in the magnitude to offset it. As a matter of fact, I only see in total extra revenue budgeted for next year of $3,400. I guess I'm really wondering if we're starting to realize why we are in trouble, governments. Do we need to have $1,000 a month meeting expenses, and that's based on less than four people, and now over and above that, and it's not just this, there's other things in materials supply, now we're being asked for an additional 40% money in 2017 for material and supplies, and I guess, without any actual details, I don't know what's justifying a 40% increase in this department of 3.89 people. And again, I'm not picking on the department, I'm not picking on the individuals. It's out of control. So tell me why we need to increase our meetings and other materials by 40%. So I'm having trouble passing this and not reducing this line unless I get some specific details. $1,000 a month last year, and we want to increase. Councillor Oliver?
Mr. Mayor, my question isn't specifically around yours, and I don't know whether you'll permit me
I'll permit it.
to make this comment.
I guess I'm frustrated in
But
trying to understand these figures.
With the earlier motion that Councillor Brunton put forward and that a majority of us passed, we have cut this overall budget by $143,000 with the four things. Are we contemplating and looking for more cuts, Mr. Mayor? I realize that was the overall budget. We're now getting into individual budgets like the smoke-free. Staff may very well say, well, the one place we feel we can make some cuts to accommodate that $143,000 that council reduced our levy subsidy by could be out of the smoke-free program. I, for one, am prepared to ask staff, as Marlene said they were going to do. We've told them to cut $143,000. They're going to come back to us, presumably in a few weeks, and say, here's the ways in which you, council or board, can choose to implement those cuts that you forced on us. So I don't know how much longer you want to keep going down into the weeds on this one when we've already, with the overall budget, cut it by $143,000.
I'm not necessarily disagreeing with you. I know that when we passed the last motion, I asked if there were further questions on the budget, so that question to go to page 13 and look at some details of smoke-free is in order. And I would be so bold as to say, in my opinion, Councillor Oliver, and I don't disagree with you, you brought up a good point, and I don't disagree with you. But if in fact we're spending $1,000 a month on meeting costs for this department in 2016, and we're going to maybe increase it, I would think maybe staff would want to definitely go back and say, we better have a look at this and see what we're getting for this kind of taxpayer money being spent. And even one step further, could we cut down on that meeting expense for this department or any department? And I think those are good questions, that this seems to be the only time of year that we really address these things at this level. So, Councillor Oliver, I appreciate your comments. Councillor Height, please.
Thank you, Mayor Luke. Would our treasurer be able to show the account names? The account names, slide that over to the left so we can actually read it. Where was I again? I think it was materials and supplies. So promotional supplies, again, we had a budget of $8,000. We spent $15,000. And now we're coming back with a budget of 2,000, which the 2,000 doesn't mean anything if you're allowed to go almost double over your budget. So, like again, I find that there's just an awful lot of fat to trim in this program. Maybe I'm a conflict of interest, but this is a lot of packs of cigarettes. And really, if we can't get a program that's $300,000 or $400,000 to be 100% provincially funded, there's something fundamentally wrong with that. There's a few people here. And with that, Mr. Mayor, I'm going to, despite the one that we cut already, because I think there's a lot in here to trim, I'm going to move a motion to cut the $20,800 from the net levy requirement from this specific program and bring it back into line on where I think it should be. There's no reason why this program should go over budget $1.
And you're taking the 20,800 as the net levy total requirement amount on the bottom of the proposed budget for 2017, correct?
Correct.
But will that number not be somewhat affected by the previous motions we passed?
I imagine it may be, but I'm looking specifically to bring this one in line. The rest of it, staff can work out that problem.
So your motion then is to cut a further $20,800 from this budget?
From the smoke-free Ontario budget.
From this budget of Smoke-Free
It needs
Ontario,
to
correct?
stay at a provincially funded. Yes, sir.
Okay, that motion is on the floor. I'll open it for discussion. He's getting that number right here. Okay, Marlene?
Mr. Mayor, we'd just like to clarify the programming, so I'm going to ask Ms. Lipset to speak to it, if I may.
Okay.
Sorry, there's 4 components to this program. One of them is funded out of $100,000. One is funded at $80,000. The other one is funded at $149,000, and the TCAN is funded at 100%. So the one that is funded at 80 is the driver for the deficit, and the province will not allow us this year to cross-fund because we have excess money in the surveillance piece. We can't fill the part-time person, so we have $149,000 sitting there we cannot spend, but we cannot transfer it to the program with the deficit. So in order to bring the program that has the deficit into line, you're talking about reducing an FTE because that's basically all that funding is supporting. Just so you understand that we can't transfer the monies to support the other programs. They've given us finite funding.
Anything further, Councillor Height?
Certainly, Mr. Mayor. I can't transfer the amount to Norfolk County taxpayers that they already pay through the province. If someone needs to sort this out, so be it. But I'm not transferring that so that Norfolk County taxpayers could pay double.
Mr. County Manager?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I think, certainly, where you got to, I guess, with the $143,420 reduction in levy funding for health programs, certainly is already quite aggressive. What I was going to suggest is I just like council to know that certainly the mayor and CAO of Haldeman and Mayor Luke and I and General Manager Marlene Miranda we had a meeting before Christmas, and certainly we had identified a number of principles and objectives, including in the area of transparency about the true cost of doing business, continuing efforts to improve the allocation and tracking and reporting of the cost of programs, particularly those mandated by the province. I do have that summary of principles and objectives that we discussed. I think certainly I respect what Councillor Height's saying, but I think we had kind of agreed that to some degree, she and senior staff will need some time in 2017 to start to sort this out. I wondered if I could just hand out those principles and objectives just so council is aware that we had, I guess, with our funding partner, had reached some agreement on a path forward.
Thank you. You can pass that out. And Councillor Height, while that's being done, anything further before I go to Councillor Broughton?
No, sir.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Broughton, we do have a motion. You can speak to it. To the motion to remove the $20,800 further.
Sorry, Your Worship, I wanted to go back to your
Okay,
question.
okay, well, we'll get to that in a moment. Councillor Oliver, I'm still on the motion of
Yes.
20,800.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I appreciate where my colleague is coming from, but I, for one, feel we did, as the county manager said, a pretty aggressive cut already to this overall program budget, and I can't support a further cut on this specific thing. It may very well be part of where staff come up and find the 143,000 for us, but for me, that was sufficient.
Anyone else on the motion? Okay, the motion then is to remove a further 20,800 from the smoke-free Ontario budget. Hearing no more discussion, those in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4. Those opposed? 1, 2, 3, 4. And I will vote against the motion. The motion is defeated. Councillor Brunton?
Thank you, Mayor Luke. Could we go back to that meeting that the mayor was bringing up, about $1,000 a month? I believe it was in the smoke-free also. And can you, John, can you, oh, here we go again. I'm talking about the $1,000 a month. Remember, it was 11,900. I don't know what the total was, but
It's up at the third line at the top, 11,600.
yeah, there it is there. Can you break that down again? Smoke-free movie night. What is that? Reduced to youth volunteer recognition. Smoke-free movie night. Wow. $3,000. Holy cut it. I'm sorry, but it was. Well, I'm looking to where we spent all the money. That's what I'm trying. Sometimes you have to know where you've been before you know where you're going, right? So, where can somebody explain to me where the $11,000? Must have been a lot of movies, were there?
Marlene can explain the $11,000.
Where is it?
The reason why it's shaded there is because that's an actual without a budget. And as you recall, when we discussed it previously, if you go down to this line where the money's coming in from some other place, there's the revenue coming in to support paying for that program. And again, you see it's a shaded number because it doesn't have a budget.
Well, that's fine. I mean, I'm glad we got a revenue out of it, but I mean, obviously we spent it somewhere too. I'd like to know
Right
where.
here.
Yep. But what? Can you break that one down then? The
Nope.
you
Don't
can't.
have- oh,
T
we
can't.
might have. No, we don't. We don't have any further breakdown of that.
So I assume it all went into movies then. No?
No, I wouldn't say that. I wouldn't say that, Mr. Mayor. I would say that this line here talks about the movies and things.
Well,
This one doesn't.
thanks. The mayor raises a good point. $1,000 a month. This is just one part of the program. I mean, Jesus, I hope they aren't all watching movies. Thank you.
Okay, anything else further in this document you want to have a look at, being aware of the 143,420 cut overall we have passed? Councillor Columbus?
Well,
anything else?
My statement is related, and, we're experiencing a great deal of trials and tribulations with respect to $400,000 provincial smoke-free budget. And Roma's coming up at the end of the month, I believe. And are we going to have an audience with the Minister of Health with respect to this dilemma that we're facing? I think we all have doubts about the effectiveness of this program. And I just wonder, Mr. Mayor, if you'll be going to that. There's always an opportunity to meet with the Minister of Health, who is a Simcoe guy. Is that possible?
It is.
We should at least
I won't be
be-
going to that conference, but if a member of council is, we could certainly.
We should at least be forwarding a letter to him outlining our concerns with the program.
Anyone else on this budget? Okay, we will leave this this point, so at this time, you need, yeah, go ahead. Okay. The clerk has suggested rather than close this Board of Health budget meeting that I declare a recess from this because we may want at the end of our budget deliberations, and it'll probably, I safely can say, will be Friday, that we can then come back and that will allow us to revisit anything or any further information. So having said that, I would thank Susan to be here, and certainly Cecile for you to be here as well, assisting us today. And Marlene, thank you for your input as well. So I will now recess from the Board of Health budget session, and we'll now go back into the regular council meeting for a budget meeting, and I would like you to grab your 2017 binders. And I would say that certainly tab 1, I have read through much very good explanation of how the budget works, and I thank you, Mr. Ford, and your group for all of the explanation. Mr. Ford, I'm planning on going right to tab 4, page 4-1 to start there. Are you any other thoughts? Are you okay with that? Page 4-1 is the overall picture of our $81,200,000 proposed net levy requirement this year. I'm going to suggest that, are there any questions on page 4-1, 4-2, 4-3, 4-4, and finally the last page, 4-5. Any questions? Councillor Height, we'll start with you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to the treasurer, I guess I'm looking at unallocated revenues and expenditures. $9 million, and there really isn't a lot to back it. I'd like some more details on that. It's almost like having an account that says other, but $9 million worth of it.
So you want to give us your page there, Mr. Height?
I do see that we have an extra section of it. It's just
Which page are you on?
later in the budget, it comes up as its own little section, unallocated summary, 4-74, and it just still is very vague. There's some negative grants, some pills, and yada, yada, yada. I'd like some more detail on that. That's a big number.
You're under the allocated part?
He's looking at page 475.
Unallocated.
Okay, I was back on page 4-1 to 4-6.
Yeah, well, 4-1, the very first item you will see is unallocated revenues and expenditures
Okay?
of 9.1 million, or the proposed budget of 8.7 million.
Yes.
And it
That's a net
refers
revenue.
back to
Okay, I'm with you now, thank you.
another report, which I find very vague.
I've got you.
So I'm looking for some more details on that at some point in time. Not right this second, but
Well, I can, going to page 4-75, Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
I can provide some information if there's additional information that council wants. We'll certainly get that for them. The first item is a $221,700 reduction of the levy. And this is for salary gapping. Remember we talked about that before? We said we put an overall $220,000 number in. That's it. The professional consulting services, let me see if I can find that. What's that? Oh, it's legal services related to property taxes. We require some assistance from the solicitor for, some issue about property taxes. That's a budget allocation for that. The other item in there is professional consulting services.
I'm not so much concerned with that, to tell you the truth. It's more like this federal and provincial grants and the funding. The levy itself here, it says, accounts for $371,600. And since no one's in charge of this particular department, I may choose to move a motion to chop that right out of there. But I don't feel that's right.
Well, you can certainly do whatever you like. The revenues, this is where we put the corporate revenues. PILs, payment in lieu of taxes. Those are payments that we get in lieu of sending out a tax bill. There's
Provincial and federal
provincial and federal properties and provincial and federal agency properties. The federal provincial grants, that's the OMPF grant. Federal charges, investment income, or financial charges rather, investment income, that's exactly what it is. And it's down $176,000 in the budget because our cash flow is much lower than it has been in previous years because we're using our cash flow to finance our capital expenditures. And so when you look at that budget overall, you see that the net levy impact is $371,000.
How come we're missing the mark on pills?
I'm sorry?
How come we're missing the mark on pills? If you look up forecasted actuals on pills, we're out 200 and some $1,000. And then, our federal and provincial grants, we got that bang on.
Well, the federal provincial grant is the OMPF grant, and it is what it is. I mean, the budget is the budget.
But what about
the budget
pills?
is the actual. Pills are based upon, there's a whole bunch of rules around them. For some federal properties, even though we have the assessment for them and we apply a tax rate to them and all the rest of that stuff, the federal government takes that information, they pay whatever they feel like paying.
Yeah, they arbitrarily change.
How come we're budgeting a very similar number when I suppose we're going to be under budget $200 and some thousand?
We may be. The pills are a very difficult thing to deal with the provincial and federal agencies and provincial and federal government departments. We bill them. Sometimes they're paid, sometimes they're not. There's changes in what we're getting and some changes in their assessment values. Same thing as it is for property taxes. And they're just,
Can't change.
we're estimating it's going to be the same as it has been.
And somehow NBI ends up in here as well? Under financial charges?
What we do, Mr. Mayor, is when there's an NBI to hire a new staff, propose to hire a new staff, we put the 100% of the value of that employee in their budget. So let's say we're hiring a staff for $50,000 in the X department. X department's budget will show 50 grand, but we know that that person's not going to start day one. And this $11,900 represents what that phase-in reduction is. So that $50,000 employee is going to be hired March 1st or April 1st. That's the $11,000 differential. We used to put the net amount in the individual operating budgets, but what happened was then next year when they get the person in for 12 months, it really throws their budget out of whack.
Right.
So we put 100% in the budget and take a credit here.
Okay. So, like, what explains the 4% increase? Like, can we reduce that any way, shape, or form? Throw us a bone, maybe?
Well, Well, we're trying to be as fair as we can, particularly about investment income. Our investment income has been dwindling because of the reduction in our available cash flow. The only other one that's not new in there, but there's an adjusted budget for it, was $25,000 for consulting. What's that for? Oh, but what's the contracted services? Okay. And what's the contract? Okay. The second item there under contracted services is the cost of our credit rating update every year. And we're advised it's going up by $2,000. The first one is legal fees for a court case that we will be attending in February related to a tax matter.
Okay. So no,
Pardon me?
we got nothing to cut?
Nothing, no.
I'm intending not to give too much detail.
This is, there's not much we can do in this area, Mr. Mayor.
This is
It is what it is.
a matter where we're in litigation over a tax issue.
Okay.
I think you know what I'm talking about.
Kathy says nope, and we can't change the budget. Anything else up to the summary on 4.5 before we get into the requisitions from boards and agencies? Anything else there? Can I, Councillor Brunton?
Okay,
Thank you, Mayor Luke. Just very quickly, Kathy, you handed out this memorandum dated January 13th, and I stuck it in my binder, but it has a list of all the service costs over $50,000. I take that all those items are incorporated into each department budget? Yes. Okay, thank you.
Okay, I'm going to be as bold then, and I'm going to go to the summary page of 4/6, which is the requisitions from boards and agencies. There are 4 on that page: Long Point, Grand River Authorities, the Library Board, and Police Services, and the total increase in levy is $483,000 and change. Now, questions on this item? Councillor Wells.
Very much, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, since we have several representatives from the Long Point Regional Conservation Authority here, could we ask them why they're asking for almost 8% increase? Please.
Is there any member of the board, Councillor Columbus?
Well, yes, that came up at the meeting, a couple meetings ago around the table here. And that $70,700, my recollection is, I believe, $50,000 or $55,000 of that is a special levy attributed to the restoration of the Bacchus Dam at the Bacchus Mill. And so that leaves maybe whatever's left over it's for purchase of pickup truck and a lawnmower.
The dam.
It's a special levy to rehabilitate that area.
Any other questions on these 4 items? Councillor Wells?
Chair, we did have the library board there.
Yes.
4.3%.
Yes.
Yes, 4.3%. Mr. Chair, while I sit on the library board, and again, I'll say the same thing, they do a wonderful job, but 4.3% is a pretty hefty increase, and I'm suggesting that we reduce that to 2%. Not us, but that we ask them to reduce it to 2%.
You're just throwing that out.
Oh, that would be my motion, Mr. Chair.
Well, now you're talking. You have a motion then that the 4.3% increase be reduced to 2.0, correct? Okay, the motion is on the floor to reduce the library board increase of 4.3% down to 2%. We're going to speak to that motion. I saw your hand, Councillor Oliver, but I'll start with Councillor Brunton.
Thank you, Mayor Luke. I guess I can support the motion, but I need some clarification. They had in their request a new position of, I think it was about 80-something thousand dollars.
It was 80,000, yes.
Okay. If we did not approve, does that have a bearing on this 4.3%? If we remove that position, what would that bring it down
Remove an
to?
individual item. This is the board.
We cannot, as the county manager is right, we can't remove that item. We can reduce, send it back. It'll be up to the library board to make that decision, whether they will eliminate that position entirely, whether they will find the savings elsewhere, hire half-time. We deal with the dollars amount with the agencies. We don't make decisions for them where to make the cuts.
Okay, let me ask it in a different
Go
way.
ahead.
If that position was removed by the board,
Yes.
library board, what percentage would be left as an increase in their budget? Could somebody answer that question?
I cannot because I guess if I got my calculator out, I could. Their budget is proposed at 2.7, so I guess you could take that 80,000 out and divide it by the 2.692500, and that would roughly give you the...
Mr. Ford, have you got...
He might be doing it, he's pretty quick. I do know that the 112, roughly half of that is about $56,000, and it would be probably...
Close?
Be close to be 3/4 of the amount of the money for that new position. There were two other items she mentioned, I believe, as well in her presentation this morning. Yes.
If the budget were reduced by $21,900, which is essentially what Councilor's asking, that number that's on the bottom of the page, if you look at that black line at the bottom where it says $2,692,000, that number would become $2,558,500, which is oh, my math isn't working. What did I say that 2 million? What did I say it was?
2% is only a 51,600 increase.
I'm sorry, I gave you the wrong numbers. 2,670,600, which is a 3.4% increase, 3.5% increase.
Well, that, if I remember right, even though they said it was only 21,000, they said it would reduce the service that is provided to them, but in essence, that service still stays in place. So we're talking 21,000 then? That's all we're talking?
Well, if you take a look at the budget that's there, Council, look at the 2017 adjusted budget. That's what it would be, 3.5%, because that number, that new budget initiative would be taken out. So it's 3.5%, which is the 2,670,000 number.
That's fine, I get the picture, but I'll go along with Councillor Wells' recommendation. Thank you.
Councillor Oliver? Can I have your microphone? I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. The proposed budget increase was 112,100, which represents 4.3. Councillor Wells' motion says cap it at a 2.0% increase, which would take it, in my math, down to about 52,000. I don't know whether that's the difference or whether that's what it would be. Just give me 1 second. Yeah, I think that's what the 2% increase would represent. So is that in fact then a savings, Mr. Mayor, of, what is that, about almost $59,000, roughly $60,000 then would be the reduction?
Yeah.
off the levy.
That's correct.
Okay. Thank you. And I do support
more-
that. I should say, Mr. Mayor, when we had Ms. King here this morning, and she was presenting the new budget initiative around creating a new full-time position, I couldn't support that. And yes, although the impact on their budget showed as only 21,000, the reality was that it was going to cost the levy $75,200.
Right.
And that is the reality for this council, Mr. Mayor. And given the environment that we're in right now in these budget discussions, I couldn't have supported that. So I realize we can't tell them not to create the position, but I think the effect of this motion would be probably to make it not feasible for them to create the position. And I would hope that our representatives on the library board would communicate that back to them, that somehow we don't feel it's appropriate to create a new full-time position.
Councillor Height?
Mayor Luke, I guess for me, I'm a bit confused how it works at the library board. I know we have some representatives over there. I'm not sure who they are, but it seems to me whenever we get the library budget, we sort of have to approve it and we can send it back with suggestions. Because for me, I would suggest that we not pay $80-some thousand for a position that would typically pay $40,000. I'm in that field. I know our salary range is fairly well. That's very, very high, especially for a place like Norfolk County. Downtown Toronto, I still don't know that you would get that much money. But with the library itself, okay, almost a $3 million deficit. I've been here for 2 years now. I haven't seen a plan. And I feel like it's our reserve fund report, because it's been 2 years and I've been waiting for that as well. But at some point in time, we need to address these shortcomings, and I don't know how we get more of a voice to send it back to them and say, please do this.
Well, I am a member of the board, Councillor Wells is and Councillor Black. And in all due respect, the library board, there are appointed people that make the decisions on how we spend our money. And, you know, if council's going to say, well, you're going to reduce it, and this is the items you're going to reduce, then I don't think we really need a board. We might as well let council run the show. But, you know, it doesn't matter to me as a member of council if we reduce this budget by $60,000 and they can find $60,000 somewhere else to justify hiring this person. That's their call, in my opinion. I think that's what they're appointed to do. So I guess that's a debate we could have in the future. But I personally believe, and maybe Councillor Black and Wells will want to speak to this, but I believe that if this motion is passed to reduce the increase to 2%, that person will most likely, I don't think they're going to start looking at not doing the janitorial, which has been increased by $38,000 or $37,000. I think there was a septic system situation at Port Rowan, front doors on the Simcoe, and the other thing was this position. But that's up to the board, in my opinion. Thank you. Continue. Oh, I'll get you in a second. Anything else? Do you wish to respond? Then I'll go to Councillor Black.
Thank you, Mr.
You got it.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to council, I just wanted to clarify one thing. The $2,692,500 for the library is not a deficit. It is the amount proposed to be intended to be raised from the tax levy to support library operations. And I think it's important to state it in those terms. And anyway, with the motion that Councillor Wells has made, the revised total there would be $2,632,000, an increase of $51,600, and the required budget reduction by the library board would be $60,500.
Any further? Oh, sorry, Councillor Black.
Well, yes, as a board member, I was just about going to say what you said, Mayor Luke, about the, excuse me, the sheet of paper that Heather gave us this morning. I mean, if you go back to that, as we know, salaries and benefits are always make up a large portion of our budgets, and there alone is 2% increase. And to Councillor Oliver, I'm not sure if it's fair to say, to blame the 75,000 on the library. If you want to cut that 75,000, that's in the county budget, not the library budget. So you know, you could do that, but then that would reduce the level of IT service for Norfolk County. I know IT is being pressured, and this is one of the reasons why, in discussions with IT and the library, they thought that they could get a better bang for the buck at the library if they had hired an individual by themselves, and that Norfolk County IT was kind of swamped, and maybe not providing the 100% service. So I know Brent and Heather came up with this idea, and so if the county wants to save that 75,000, then they could reduce that out of the Norfolk County budget, but then you're going to be reducing the level of service for IT at Norfolk County. As you indicated, I mean, it's through no fault of their own that the contracted services went up dramatically, $38,000 for all 5 libraries. So, you know, if they go and cut that, you're going to get a lot of complaints about dirty libraries, and you know, bathrooms not being cleaned properly and the carpets not being cleaned. The minor capital, as you indicated, Mayor Luke, you know, over here, the Talbot Gardens street entrance door, the one that's used all the time, accessible, it's not working properly. And it hasn't been for quite some time. And it needs, they've had a professional come in and say that it needs to be replaced, like not just the door or tinkering around with it, because I asked that question at the library. Well, you know, can't you just kind of fix what's broken? They said no. They asked someone who is involved in door replacement, and they recommended, and I know you're going to say, well, of course they're going to recommend replacing it all, but I think that they had some integrity and said this really needs to be replaced. The weeping tiles at Port Rowan Branch, there's problems with moisture, I guess, in the basement. So unless we deal with that situation, there's going to be a big problem there. I think there already is. That's why they've identified that with the Port Rowan Branch, and Councillor Height will hear from his constituents about mold and the bad smell in the basement and ruined books. So 2%, you know, I can't support the motion on the floor, but certainly, you know, I could support something to send it back and say have another look at it and see if you can reduce your budget. But by taking it down to 2%, I don't think so.
Thank you. Motion on the floor by Wells to reduce the increase from 4.3 to 2.0. Any further discussion? I have Sonnenberg and then Oliver.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Seems to me that the library is trying to overextend its mandate there. You know, we started out with books, and then we're into movies and music and reading programs and computers. Now we're into 3D printers? Come on. How many Norfolk County residents have a 3D printer? But then it says here, this is to be funded from funds received from John Race. Did John Race specify, I want 3D printers in the libraries, or did he just make a general contribution to the library? So, anybody on the board want to answer the need for 3D printers, really? Thank you.
Councillor Oliver.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I am going to support the motion, but I do have a question for Ms. Robinson. At least I think she's the right one to direct it to, and it is with respect to the janitorial services contract and the identified increase, not the cost of the contract, but the increased cost of the contract of $38,000. Can you shed any light on this, Lee, that we must have a new contractor, I assume, because the old one wasn't doing a proper job? That seems like a huge contract increase, and what is the value of the contract for the library cleaning, if you know?
Through the mayor to council, I'm not aware of the total value of the contract to the library, but I can certainly get that information for you. And there was significant changes made to the contract, and in addition, they asked for some additional services as well, which accounts for what the increase is.
Okay,
So that's that, but I will get you the total value of the contract for the library.
thank you.
Councillor Black?
Contract with when the new Delhi Library comes on board, I can see that that contract may even go up further. I don't know if it's been, they've accommodated the doubling of the Delhi Library, so you can anticipate this going up further.
Possibly it's not in here, I don't know. Councillor Sonnenberg?
Mr. Mayor, my question was not rhetorical. I do want an answer from someone on the library board to justify the need for 3D printers.
I can't answer that. Councillor Black, can you answer that?
All I can say is, no, I cannot answer that question, justification of it, other than to say that in this new world and technology and creativity, that these things are available and they lead to innovative thinking. And I think at the library, they're trying to stimulate that sort of thought, the creativity. So, and this piece of machinery allows them to actually produce something in 3D. So I think it's the day and age and technology that we live in, and it could lead to higher productivity.
Councillor Wells?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, I can't answer this question, but what I would say is, chances are when this goes back to the library board, Ms. King will be here to respond to our request, and at that time, I'm sure that Councillor Sonnenberg can ask her directly, and she would be only too happy to respond.
Thank you. Councillor Broughton?
Thank you, Mayor Luke. I kind of agree with Councillor Sonnenberg. It's not just this 3D printer. If you've been in there, they've got a glassed-in enclosure now built to house it all, and I don't know what that cost us. But I frequent the library. I love to read the old newspaper just on paper. And but in terms of books, a lot of that stuff you can get online now. And so I tend to agree that they're spreading their wings maybe too much, and it's in some respects it's good, but I support Councillor Wells' motion. Thank you.
Councillor Height?
Thank you, Mayor Luca. On our screens in front of us, it says here 3M maintenance contracts. There was an approved budget in 2016 of $25,000 roughly, and then it's in the 2017 proposed budget, but none of it ever got spent, even in the 2016 forecasted actual. What is that business? Down at the bottom, second from the bottom. Nothing was spent. There's 25 grand sitting in the budget. It's in there again for the next year. I would suggest that's an easy cut right there.
I don't know if there's a late invoice coming after the fact. I can't answer that. That's something we'd have to ask Heather or Peter. John, I don't think we can answer that. It does seem unusual, though, that Heather would have in the board something budgeted and not follow through with a cost. John, do you know? He does know. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If you look at what's on the screen right now, you'll see that that number there is $141,700, and that's the forecasted actual for 2016. It's not been broken down into each of these different buckets. So if I just take this and close it up, the actual is 141, the budget was 130, 105.
That's all you get.
When you expand it, you see all these individual items, but there's no actual beside them. The actual is just call it in general.
Okay.
So 3M could be the maintenance contract or the 3D printer. I don't know.
I don't know, but it appears that most of that budget has been spent. Sorry? And so they have spent some money on that, no doubt. Yeah, okay. Self-checkout technology, etc. Thanks. Anything else, Councillor Heighton? Motion is to reduce it from 4.3 to 2. Are we ready to vote? If so, those in favor of that motion? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Those opposed? Motion is carried. We will have a short break till 3 o'clock.
Mr. Mayor, can I just clarify what you just said, that we're not reducing the budget, we're asking the library board, we're referring it to the library board requesting a reduction, because we can't just reduce this budget.
We're sending it back and asking them
Ask
to...
them to reduce the
to
funding.
do, okay, yeah, I may have
Okay,
used the
I just
word,
want
wrong
to make sure
words.
that we're very clear on
Okay,
that.
thank you.
Thank you.
Break time.